Hi, I'm Dee. If you're new here, I'm an illustrator creating whimsical girls with big eyes where I explore emotion, self-expression and imagination. A few years ago, I stepped away from creating tutorial videos and selling my art. I closed down my website in 2022, but recently I've been feeling inspired to start creating again. I'm usually a pencil artist, so working with something really soft and unpredictable really took me outside my comfort zone. But I discovered at the end of it that I can actually use the oil pastels alongside my pencils. So this video is not an expert-led tutorial, it's more a learn with me. So if you'd like to come and see how I created one of my sleeping reflective girls using the oil pastel, then let's get started. So I started off drawing a face with a normal HB pencil. I wanted to draw one of my big-eyed girls in the usual format that I normally do, and I was eager this time that instead of using my pencils I would use pastels. I wanted to see if I could create a nice silky dreamy skin tone. I then used a kneadable eraser to take away the dark line, and then I began by laying down my first base colour, which was white. I wanted to have that to blend all colours into. I was hoping that that would be what would keep it milky and dreamy looking. So I then found a pink tone and went in and went round all of the outside of the face, all round the cheeks, all round the eyes. I do this because I try to have it darker around the outsides of each area to try and create an illusion of the face and the eyes being round. So I then put some of the pink in the corner of the eyes and all of the cheeks, and tried to keep a white space where the bags of her eyes could be, and then I coloured some of her forehead. At this point I was thinking I would have a girl with her eyes open, so I had created a little area where her eyelid could be. I then went round the nose and under the lips and around the chin, trying to get that first sort of dark value down, and then I wanted to put the white over the top. I was eager to keep white there all the time because I thought it was a nice safety thing to keep the colours blended into the milky tone, and I was hoping that this is what was going to keep it looking dreamy. I then went round the outside with a darker tone, so I used a brown, and again round the eyes, trying to keep all these areas darker than the rest, and then again round the nose, under the lips and in between the nose and the lips to try and create a little bit of a shadow. I put the darker tone in at the eyes as well, and then I found a nude colour, which I was actually quite annoyed with myself because I thought I probably should have started with this. This looks like it's much closer to the skin colours that I try to achieve. But anyway, I persevered, went over the top of the pink and then went further in on the face just to try and create the areas where I wanted it to be more white and where I wanted more value to create that illusion of the face being round. I then got my blending stump, and this is where I start having a field day because I find it quite meditative. Once I start blending the colours together, I can get kind of lost in that. So I find it very satisfying once I started to see the colours blend together. So I was just pulling the colours down into each other. So where it was white, I tried to pull some of the colour over into the white, and where I had the pink and the nude tone together, I tried to push the colours together to try and get a nice colour on the cheek. I then went back to using the white, trying to keep it milky looking, so I thought that if I continued to just keep adding white, it would be safer for me. It would stop the colours from getting too dark, and it would give me something to keep blending into. And so yeah, I just continued to go around my blending stamp, and so where there was just white and just a little bit of a nudie tone close by, I tried to pull them over a little bit to try and create a little bit of a colour on the bottom of the face, but not as much as what was further up on the cheeks. I really enjoyed using these pastels actually. I found them soft and buttery. Initially I found them a bit clunky, big, chunky, not able to get definition because I'm used to using a pencil and I like having the control of a pencil, so I kind of, I've got control, I just know where I'm going and what I'm doing. But with the pastels, they were a lot messier, they were softer, they were unpredictable. But I kept persevering, and there was moments where I thought, oh, I shouldn't have done that, but you know, I just kept going. I was trying here to build up more and more tone on the cheeks. I kind of varied between sort of golden tones and nudes and pinks, and tried to create the bridge over the nose. So I do a little like a little bridge shape between the button of the nose and on the bridge, and then creating an area that would be white. So that's where I like to think of the light would be reflecting off her forehead and on the bridge of her nose, on the top of her nose and on her chin. So those areas I try to keep white. And again, so just continuing to bring in the white. I was building it up by starting off with light colours, then getting darker. And so this was a bit of a burgundy red that I thought I'd bring into the eyes. I usually enjoy having that sort of tone in the corner of the eye when I start building up the emotion. At this point, I still was thinking that I was going to have the girl's eye open and would do that at a later date. I actually end up filling in the eyelid and having her as a sleeping girl, because that was what the feeling I was getting from her as I was creating her. And so here I was a little bit unsure whether it was going to be okay. It still felt very messy. It still felt like it wasn't going to do what I wanted it to do. But I did like the fact that I could gain back a little bit of control when I kept the white closer to the lips and on the chin, and then just drag some of the colour down into it, because then I was able to get a lighter tone than what was on the cheek. So in a way I was starting to feel quite happy with where it was going at this point, still thinking it'll be okay. So basically I'm just continuing doing more of the same, just blending it all together and learn. I think when you start I think you have to use something to understand how it works for you. And so because I like lots of control, this definitely took me out of my comfort zone. But my saving grace was always the white. I just kept returning back to the white to try and lighten the areas where it should be lighter. And I think now it was starting to look like I was moving in the right direction. I think as well, I'm not really thinking of much in technical terms or technical rules ever when I'm drawing. I kind of draw from instinct. I'm looking at where I want the light to sit and where I want to create depth. So I tend to leave some of the white of the paper showing through in areas like the forehead, the bridge of the nose and the chin, and these become my lighter areas. Then I gradually build up more colour around the outside of the face, around the eyes and alongside the nose. By making these areas darker, it starts to give the face a sense of roundness and helps to push the eyes and the features back into the face. So I'm really just building from light to dark, using the changes in tone to create the illusion and form of depth. So I think this is where I start to feel like I want the girl's eyelids to close. I think when I'm drawing or when I'm creating something, I go into this sort of strange zone where it's almost like a meditation, and it's like the art starts to grow without you thinking or without me thinking too much about it. I go by feeling, and as the picture progresses, I get a feeling for how the girl is wanting to express herself. So I always assume that that's a part of me, probably of my subconscious, that wants to express something. And this is where the girl starts to feel like she's reflective. She's looking inward. So even though I was experimenting with the actual pastels, I still couldn't resist, or I still couldn't stop my whatever S that takes over from creating a feeling. So I was perhaps being reflective on this day of other things going on, so it felt appropriate to make her eyes sleeping, and I liked how the pastels were laying down, and it felt like I could give her nice eyelids now. I was starting to get a little bit more confident. I think I was starting to trust in the method that I was doing, and I could see how I could always blend everything into each other. So it was similar to the pencils in that way, especially with the oil pencils, where you build up the colours from light to dark, and how the pencils sit nice on top of each other. So I left the centre of her eyelid white again to have the illusion of that's where the light is sitting on her eye, and then having it darker as it gets to the corners and to the outside. So just continuing using some nice goldy tones and some reds on the lid, and creating that circle, and then going over the top with the white, and then blending it all in together. At this point I'm starting to wonder if it's a good idea to start perhaps bringing in pencils, but I continue more with the pastels. I really like how they're blending together, and I start concentrating now on the mouth and the chin, and I tried to create the little white area above the lip by putting down a goldy tone and then drawing around with the stump to try and create that white area, but I wasn't happy with this. I was thinking it's too dark. I've just gone and made it really dark, so I went back over with the white and started blending it in together. I'm hoping that I could use just the white eventually over the top of the lip to try and get that little white highlight on the top of the lip that I like to do with my pencils. I did the chin. I always draw a little circle on the chin similar to the nose, to help get that illusion of the face being round. Here I've gone back up onto the bridge of the nose. I was trying to build up a bit of depth between the eye and onto the bridge of the nose. I don't create faces to look realistic, so I'm still trying to create the depth of the nose and the depth between the nose and the eye, but I prefer to have a little button nose. I don't really like creating real lifelike noses. But anyway, I've used a red around the top of her head. This is where her hairline is going to be, and so I wanted to create a bit of a shadow but using a deep red tone. It felt like it was a nice tone to have for the rest of the colours that I've got going on in her face. And then I've decided to start the lips. And I found the lips really tricky, again, because I'm used to having a really thin pencil with a sharp point where I can draw the little lines and create the shape of the lips. So I did some little lines as best as I could. They were really messy. So I brought the stump in to try and move them around and control them a little bit. And I found that I was able to drag some of that colour down and use my stump to create the little curled circles that I used to try and make the lips look round. I was mindful as well of trying to keep little area white for where the light was going to be, and then I brought in the dark to have under the lip to create a little bit of shadow and to blend in to the rest of the chin. So this is where I bring in my pencil, and I feel really, really good to know that I can have a little bit of control as to how I shape things. So I just knew that with the pastels there was no way I was going to be able to get a really fine line in between the lips, or how to create the nostrils, and then again with the eye. So I go along the outside bottom of the eye with the black to create the definition and to show that the eye is shut. I don't actually give her eyelashes yet. I've still got the artwork sitting there. I still haven't decided on what to do with her, but at some point I'll finish her off with some eyelashes, and she'll have a purpose of some description at some point. I'll feel drawn to her and I'll create some artwork. But for this particular piece, it was purely experimenting with the pastels and then bringing in the pencils. So I've brought in a grey to try and create a little bit of a shadow underneath where her eyes closed. And I was quite happy with how it was going down underneath her eyes. I was starting to realise that I could blend it in. Every time I put something down, I could use my little blending stump to blend it in, and it usually worked out okay. And where I'd gone down too dark, I could go over with white. So I felt like I had a bit of a safety blanket when I brought in pencils and when I continued using the white. So I wanted to bring a little bit of brightness into her face, so I've brought in a nice bright yellow and put it around the ear, just underneath the areas that were white, just to create that sort of gradual shift in tone and to bring some brightness in. And of course, once I started reaching for bright yellows, I saw the bright red and thought, okay, I've used the bright red around the nose, so I do the little white circle, and then I start to drag whatever colour I put around that circle down to try and create the shape of the nose. So I used a blending stump to do that. I realised the blending stump was pretty much my pencil. Just put down an area of colour using the pastel, and then use the blending stump to shape and build and create the definition or the detail that I was hoping to achieve. So at this point I'm realising that the stump was able to create what looked like more like a shadow, and so I brought in the black pencil to then define where the nose actually ended, and you could see that the darker bit where the stump had blended was a bit of shadow. So I wanted to get the lips a little bit darker and create a little bit of a smile line, and then darkening up around the nostril, and then back in under the eyes. I start bringing in the pink to try and give her some pink on her cheeks, and I like to add a little bit of orange in with the pink. It just warms it up, felt like that was the colour tones that were starting to feel right for her face, and I love how they just blend together. I do find the blending really relaxing. Once I start seeing it all come together and look smooth, it really does take me into some kind of meditation zone. I'm sure of it. It's so peaceful and quiet when I go there. And so this was me just trying to create a little bit more darkness under the eye and dragging it up onto the lid to try and create the round effect, then down the side of the cheek. I think now that I've had a couple of plays with the pastels, I can see how I can use them. I'm aware that it's by no means perfect and it's purely experimental, but I think it's really good when you can have a play and critique yourself, or just discover what works, what doesn't work, how you could do better next time. It's all part of the process, so I try to not be too harsh on myself when I'm in the creative zone. I think it destroys the little child part, the imagination and the creative part when you start being critical on any kind of arty work. I think all of it is valid. Here I'm putting in some red and then just dragging along and building up. I'm pretty much doing the same thing all the time, so I hope you're not getting bored. If there's anything that you're enjoying seeing, or if there's anything else that you would like me to do as a video, it would be really lovely if you could comment and I'll see what I can do. I'd like to start doing more little videos, not regularly as in every week, but as and when I've got time. It would be nice to say I do enjoy the connection of being around other artists, other people who are learning, and I do think it's a nice thing to be together with other creatives where you can share and critique or help out or encourage with your arty work. So I brought in the luminance pencil. I was hoping I could go over the top of it and make it whiter, but I learned that I couldn't. So a little bit of pink over the bridge of the nose, and I find that if you do it in an arch shape, it helps make the nose look round. So having that little arch and then blending it and dragging it into the lighter colours helps it to look a bit more what's the word? Sorry, I've got a word block, but when you just blend things together, it just more cohesive. Is that the word? I don't even think that's the right word, but hopefully you know what I'm meaning. When it's like a smooth transition, it's sort of like just naturally goes from dark into lighter, then lighter again. So whatever that word is, again, put it in the comments if you can think of it. But yeah, so now I'm doing the lips, going in with the red. So it's hard to see what I'm doing because my hand's over the mouth, but basically I decided with the lips to put most of the colour on the inside where the line was and then drag it out. I felt that that was the best way to help me get the definition and to get the effect that I usually do with my pencils. And I do think it worked quite well. Obviously, each time you do it, you get better. But yeah, having it darker and having those little white areas helped to show where the highlight was. So again, I'm still trying to use my luminous pencil here to get the white, but it just didn't quite work. So where I was wanting white, I realised I had to just keep with the pastel. And yeah, I'm literally just continuing more of the same, a little bit darker now in the corner of the eye and dragging it down. Yeah, I used the red to drag down to try and
highlight a little bit more of that white. So I moved the oil pastel and the shape of how I would like the face to be. So if that makes sense, if I'd gone straight down, it wouldn't have given the illusion of it being round. So I was, like I did with the bridge of the nose, moving the pastel into the shape of how you would imagine the face to be if it was 3D. And again, blending some of the goldy yellow into that. But yeah, I was starting to feel quite pleased with how the colours were moving together, how I could continue just softening and blending, and I did feel like it was starting to look dreamy. I was happy that I'd used the white as much as I did. I mean, if there's any other ways of doing it, I'd be happy to hear from someone. I'm obviously still learning with the pastels. So I'm trying to go over the top of this with a Faber-Castell white. So it didn't matter which white pencil I used. They weren't doing what I wanted them to do. Although I did keep trying. Just kept putting the white pastel in instead. So I'm trying to think if there's anything I would have done differently, but yeah, I'm happy that I started with the white and always had that to blend into. Yeah, I can't think of anything that's really, I think I should definitely not have done that. I think most of it would just be a case of getting better with the technique of blending with them. I tried using the stumps. I also tried using, I can't remember what they're called. It was like a little stump that I put the actual pastel onto the tip of it and tried using it. And it kind of worked in bits. So this is the black. I was a bit wary of bringing in the really dark black brown because I knew that there was a lot of pastel on the page by now, and it was really it could move a lot, so I just wanted small amounts of any colour I was putting down now. There was a point where I don't know, because I've never used them before, I may have overworked them a little bit, because they did start to feel a little bit sticky at this point, but I was still able to control them, and I don't know if that's what normally happens, but I'm trying to create the bridge of the nose a bit more now, so alternating between golds and whites, and I quite liked how the gold and the white blended together. When I was experimenting before I started recording the video, I tried doing a face where I also used kitchen roll to blend it together. That kind of worked well. Also the cotton wool buds for your ears, they worked well, and some of the little paper stumps as well. So I tried with my finger, but I didn't feel like I had a lot of control with my finger. I felt like my fingers were just fat and unable to get the definition that I wanted. I have seen some artists using gloves while they do the blending. I don't know if that makes any difference. I think it just maybe stops blisters or stops your hands from getting really, really messy. I brought in some red on top of her nose, and I just continued to do little circular motions around the tip so that the white bit was the real highlight, and then the round bit was starting to create the actual shape of the nose. I quite like how the nose turned out. Probably needs a little bit more work with it, but in my whimsical style of girls that I create, I think it was alright. I don't really go for perfection or realisticness, or like I've said before, it's more on feeling and intuition and what feels right at the time. I liked giving her some bright red in her lips, so I was just dotting it around her lips because I didn't have a lot of control. And again, I just used the stump to move it and shape it. Next time I'll do it as a side view when I'm doing the mouth, so that you can perhaps see more what I'm doing. I just continue to try using the white pencil, but it just didn't go over the top at this point. I think there was just too much oil pastel on the page at this point. So anytime I wanted white, I had to use the pastel, but it was so difficult to get it in the areas that I wanted, on things like the lips and under the nose, on the bottom of the nose. I'm sure there's a way of doing it that's better than the way that I've been doing it. But bringing in the pencil was always a relief when I knew my black pencil could work. So this was me just trying to define the difference between where the hair would be. So I put some black under there, and then used some black to start creating a little bit of a shadow coming over the lid a little bit. And it was nice because you can bring in your blending stump and blend all that together. So I was really pleased about that. Yeah, the blending stump worked well at blending them both together. So I tried to move some of that because the colour sort of stays on the stump for a little while. So I was trying to blend what was on the stump into the area between the eye and the nose, trying to make it a bit darker. It would be lovely if anybody had any comments, if they've got any advice on how I could have done it better. I would love to hear from you. So this was me just continuing on the bridge. I could see that it could take a lot of hours perhaps to get it to where you actually really wanted it to be. Maybe that was just me never quite getting to where it wanted to be. But this is the little thing I was trying to tell you about, is it? Forget what it's called again. Put it in the comments if you can remember what they're called. But yeah, it's got a little spongy nib on the end of it. So what I did was I dipped it onto the pastel, tried to get lots of pastel on there, and tried to use that to get some definition and some little highlights on the lips. And then I used the red pencil to shape it, so you could still see where the little bits of white had been, and then with the pencil doing little arches down to try and create the shape of lips, to let them look like they're kind of round. So dragging it down from the inside or dragging it up. Yeah, I quite liked it when I was able to use the red on top of the pastels. I think it was mostly just the white that I was unable to use, but it turned out fine that the pastel was always able to give me the little bits of white that I wanted. But yeah, quite liked that I was able to drag some red down into the shape that I wanted for the lips. When I'm doing the lips and the nose of my big-eyed girls, I tend to do the nose and the mouth the same sort of size, so they're not in proportion to what you would expect on a face. I like to keep them quite doll-like. It's just my style. It's just the way that I enjoy creating. I've not really had an interest for realistic faces. but obviously there are elements of the technical aspects where that's required. But like I've said, I don't really like to get too involved in the technical side of creating. I think for me it just takes the joy out of it. I've never been one for rules and technical sort of terms, so please forgive me on that one. I was just using the black pencil now to try and create a shadow under the nose. Did it work? I'm not sure. I think it required a little bit more blending. I think perhaps a little bit more black coming up the side of the nose to create the roundness. But at this point I quite liked the reds and the oranges. They were just making me feel quite happy. And that is always the goal, to feel quite happy with how your art is making you feel. She started to feel almost like she could be a little bit of a clown. So I was starting to wonder if there was a part of myself trying to create the clown. I wasn't really sure where that was going. I didn't really explore that sort of thought process. I just continued with the experiment, and like I said, at some point I'm sure this girl's going to call to me when I need to express something, and she may very well become a clown. Or not, who knows? So this is where I brought in one of the paper stamps. I found them equally as good as the other stamp. I found I was able to drag the pastels around, and so I was trying to create more of a lip. So by creating a bigger shadow, it gave me more area to have for the lips to have an area of white. And then I just dragged the rest of it up into the whiter areas, bringing more white in where I felt it was needed. I did find it very relaxing, I do have to say. I think that I will be using pastels a lot more. I did really feel like they could give me a little bit more than what I could with my pencils. There was definitely, I think I had, in the end, I felt like I had more control, in the ironic sort of sense of it, where it started off feeling like I had no control, but I think with practice and using them a bit more, I think I would learn how I could apply things in better ways to give me more control. But as far as the skin was concerned, I was really happy with how it turned out. I know it's not perfect, but I think I ultimately did get the feeling of it being dreamy and innocent and childlike, which was what I wanted. And hopefully you can see now that it's just a case of every now and again just darkening up certain areas. So I just brought in some more red. I was actually really loving her nose at this point. I thought I really love little red noses. They're just so cute. And the white I was trying to do under her nose. Again, didn't have a lot of control for it, but I used the stump to move it around to where I wanted, and then I would use my pencil to darken up the areas. So it did work. It did work in the end. So this was me just dragging areas of the colour on the bridge of her nose up the nose to make it blend in more, to give the illusion of that being the bridge of the nose. I would probably try and have a bit more white, a smaller area in the centre of the bridge of the nose. That was why I brought in some more of the nudie colour to try and do that. And then it was a case of trying to just blend that in at the top into the head. I think once she starts getting hair and more of a personality, I think that would be an area that I could then start to decide on where shadows on her head should be. But this was me trying to create a little bit of a shadow just above the lid of her eye. And I think I got to a point where I wasn't sure if it would ever end, if I would ever get to the end, if I would just always have to keep adding more layers. And I wasn't sure if I was starting to spoil it a bit. But I was enjoying doing it, so I just kept feeling like I still had to keep adding more bits. But this was me trying to get a little bit more of a shadow just under where her hair would then be, using the black pencil. And then down the side of her face. So basically, heading towards the last 8 or 9 minutes of the video, I do feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, because I'm doing the same process each time I do something. So I don't want you to get bored, but I think the last few minutes of the video are just me trying to add the final little details of where I wanted to go with it. I started to feel now like I was spoiling it. I was trying to get it darker in here, and it was starting to feel sticky. And I felt like I was going to start losing the white bag, and then I wondered if I should not have the white bag and have it really dark in under there. But then it kind of started to take on a mind of its own. I still quite liked it though. I think sometimes with these little details, these are where you start getting personality come through in a character, where they might end up not looking exactly as you imagined them to look, or how you imagine them to be with the process you're going through. But then these little other details start to come in, and then that's when I start wondering if I should have her crying, or is she feeling, even though she's reflective, is she feeling sadder in her reflections rather than just daydreaming? So with this girl, I felt like there was a lot of potential for her to go in lots of different ways. I didn't want to get bogged down in the emotional side of it with this particular video. So I kind of accepted that her eyes were starting to look like they could potentially be crying, or they could potentially have like mascara or makeup running down from them, and it kind of felt right, but I didn't want to get bogged down in that sort of side of things. I might do some other videos around that emotional side at a later date, but I've gone in and put some more white at the bottom. I started to enjoy seeing texture there as well, so I wasn't sure whether I should blend it in and have it all smooth or have it more with texture. I thought it was quite interesting with the texture, and I loved how the pastels could just keep bringing in a little pop of extra colour. So at some point she will have eyelashes, and at some point she will have an emotional message or a story or an outcome. But at the minute, I think she's been a really lovely little experiment for me using pastels. I've really enjoyed using them, and I think it's something I'll do a lot more of. So I'm going to leave you now to watch the last 4 or 5 minutes just to see how it ends up, Can't say it gets much different to this, it's more just little fine details. But it's been so lovely to be here, and if you have enjoyed watching, and if you feel like you've learned something, or if you feel like you could teach me something or give me some advice, then all of that would be welcome. So I'll say my goodbyes and just leave the video to run for you, hopefully to enjoy. Bye.